we do want to talk about your time in America. Now, you sent me a message,
Yes.
I don't know, week and a half ago, and went,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, I'm off to observe the election in America." And I was like, "Oh, geez, you're pretty lucky, man." Tell us the situation. How did you get to shoot off to America and observe? You used the word observe the election. What was
Yeah.
it all about?
Well, I've got a mate. His name is James. He's the punter, and he until this round of election, he just gets it right all the time. I think he was the only one that predicted that New Lynn sort of would go to the National Party, and we just we met on Twitter two couple of years ago, and we've just got a close friendship, and we've done a tour, sort of like a music and getting to know American tour about 2 years ago, and we decided to go on a self-funded trip up to uh, particularly the eastern states to observe the election. So, we went there, we spent some time in New York, a lot of time in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is an interesting place. It's like Alabama. It's Pittsburgh and Philadelphia with Alabama in the middle. And
Yeah.
that's actually not unusual in the States. You've got, some of those states are like 2 or 3 different countries. So basically, we just went on a self-funded tour, but our aim was to talk to ordinary, for want of a better terms, ordinary Americans in their own backyards, in their own barbershops, in their own diners, in their own dive bars, and that's what we sought out to do.
Interesting you say self-funded, because I think I heard a
Yeah.
particular commentator talking to you about there's a commentator over there riding off the back of Radio Watia. So he was either wrong or that wasn't you, or were you doing stuff for Watia while you're over
No,
there?
I was doing stuff for Watia, and no, just to be absolutely transparent, I got a small koha, but certainly didn't pay for the airfares or anything like that. And and I was doing work for Watia. Also had a corridor to RNZ and TVNZ and to ZB. So So that's how it worked out, Pat. But by and large, it was self-funded. I can tell you that.
Well, we showed you a couple of the videos that you sent us. We
Yes.
showed the people, especially the BHN gear. I'm sure that got good
Nice.
use while you were over there.
Yes.
One of the things that I think we all want to know about is you went to did you go to the Madison Square Garden Trump rally,
Yeah,
the
we
one with
spent
Tony
a lot of
Hinchcliffe?
time spent a lot of time outside talking to the folks there, and there were some oddballs, some real strange sort of wackos that believe in lasers, that believe in that he is the coming of the prophecy. But I want to be honest with you, Pat. I also met some pretty decent people that you could sit down and have a corridor with, and if there's anything I've come back from this trip is that we ought not to demonize all Trumpites and Trump supporters. There are people that do feel disenfranchised, that do feel hopeless, that feel left down by the system, and particularly traditional independent and Democratic voters that just didn't know what the Democratic Party stands for and just felt abandoned from them. And that was just a common theme I got from ordinary good folks.
So you didn't get to go inside the rally. Did you just go and visit the outside and get the kind of vibe of it?
We did a bit of both, but
Okay.
it was just a bizarre sort of scene for me, and I don't want to stick around there too long. I was there for about 4 hours talking to folks, and that was enough for me.
What was it like on the inside, seeing whenever you were there for stuff from the stage?
Yeah, it was evangelical. It was a little bit scary. I was very careful not to sort of snigger or laugh inappropriate, because some of it was humorous and in effect, Pat. But it was high energy, nothing I've sort of seen before, and evangelical, as if you were at some sort of a people. His staunch supporters see him as a coming of the Lord, the second coming of the Lord. It's sort of hard to describe, but that's the reality of the view we got from a lot of people. But again, Pat, I just want to say that there were some people you were able to sit down and have a corridor with, and just felt that life, that they had been squeezed, and that even though when you asked, how would he turn it about? How would the billionaires who supported him make your life better? It was really hard to get a clear view from them, other than can't be any worse than what we've got.
Just speaking of that, I mean, Gold's just asked a question here. What was it like being better informed than local Democrats? Were you able to convince any of the Trump/Harris positions?
Shane, what was it like being better informed? Yeah,
Did you change any hearts? Okay, let me repackage that. Did you change any hearts and minds?
No, that wasn't my purpose. My purpose was to listen to them and to try and get an understanding of them. And I've spoken about some folks that I met on the Trump line and the Trump rally, but I also got this perspective by a group of young Puerto Rican guys in Allentown. And so let me give you some perspective of Allentown. Yeah. Allentown was an industrial city where there was a lot of money around. They got paid big salaries, and then within 3 or 4 years, 100,000 jobs were lost in the steel industry. So you're talking to younger people whose mum and dad were laid off, who were unemployed for 20 odd years, all then took up service sector jobs on $6-7 an hour plus tips, and and as one of the people we spoke to in the barber shop in Allentown, as he said to me, he said, Shane, I've been poor all my life. I've been poor under Biden. I've been poor under Trump previously. I've been poor under Obama, Democrat or Republican. It doesn't really matter. I'm poor, and whether you're poor under Republican or poor under Democrat, it's almost irrelevant. You're just poor, and I got that.
I watched some really interesting commentary over the weekend. I think it might have been Kyle Kalinske, who was talking about Donald Trump being the revolutionary figure between the two, that Kamala Harris ended up being the establishment candidate and Donald Trump was the revolutionary candidate. And I think what he was saying, to probably butcher his whole clip, is that it wouldn't have mattered who the Democrats put forward, because there's all that backbiting, fighting going on at the moment. Because not to say he's going to have a good revolution, but because he was the revolutionary character of the two, he was always going to win. Now, people are saying that in hindsight, obviously. I mean, Kyle Kalinske also did a pre-election sort of prediction where sort of at the worst case scenario, Kamala would still win. So he got that wrong. Now on reflection, he's saying, this revolutionary, and his position was the only thing you can do to combat like a revolutionary conservative is to have a revolutionary progressive. And then people have started to talk about how since Bernie disappeared because of the DNC kind of running him, taking an election off him almost, they've gone establishment, whereas the Republicans have gone more populist. And that's actually now where the winning formula is, that these are my words as I'm thinking it as we're speaking.
I get what you're saying.
The Democrats are kind of becoming everything that the Republicans are accusing them of. They are the swamp. And I'm not saying I believe this, but I can get how they're now being labeled as that. And look, Trump's going to have a swamp. There's no question about that. But because he's able to sell the idea of being the revolutionary, he's got there. It was a really interesting take, I thought.
I think this Trump administration will unravel, and it'll unravel reasonably quickly. Because just the egos in the room. How the hell will Musk and Trump and JF Kennedy Jr. and others sort of get on? How will they function on a day-to-day basis? I just don't think. And JD Vance, although he played quite a steady role and influence in the campaign, but I just don't know how they're going to work amongst themselves, let alone set an agenda. But having said that, and the guy got mandate. He won all 7 swing states. He won the popular vote. They won the Senate, including unseating, I think, a senator who'd been in the seat for 20 years in Pennsylvania. And it looks like they're going to get the House, and of course they've got the Supreme Court. So, my gosh, it from a Democratic perspective, could it be any more start? What I said, and I think there's a very important lesson for Labor here, is that if parties who presume to be of the left are simply neoliberal light. People are going to vote for the real thing, you know, and and the Democratic Party for quite some time they don't even talk about the working class, Pat. They don't
Yeah.
like that term. You know, they talk about the middle class, which is cool. But if you're a an electrician or a plumber, you do feel that you've been sort of left behind from your own party, and if you're going to get ripped off or mistreated by, say, the National Party in New Zealand or the Republican Party in the USA, that's bad enough. But when you feel that you've been let down and abandoned by your own, that's quite a deep grievance.
Yeah, I can't remember who I was talking to. I think it was a Labour MP on the show. And I brought up that thing that we've said often, which is when National claims that the CEOs don't like Labour, Labour should go, that's right, we're for the workers. And I
Yeah.
said, we're for the factory floor workers. And the point that, I don't think it was Kieran, it might have been Kieran, I can't remember. The point that they made back to me was, the problem is there's not that many factory floor workers left. That's not the
Yeah.
economy we're living in anymore. So how do you then? You're talking about the middle class or the working class. How do you then pitch this message to a working class that at one stage looked very
Yeah.
much like the steel worker and
Yeah.
and now, I mean, you say plumber and sparkies, dude.
Yeah.
Plumber and sparkies make a shit ton of money. So I
Yeah.
can imagine some of
And
those
there's
guys
more and
quite
there's more
liking the
business and there's more
yeah,
businesses. Yeah.
quite liking the tax breaks that the right will give them.
Yeah. No, I get that, and I know that there's these sort of changing dynamics, but Trump, man, and please don't get me wrong, I despise the dude, but his position, without any inquiring in terms of how is it going to be paid for, how much this will cost, but when he said that I'm going to no tax on overtime, no tax on tips. I'll tell you what, that was a direct message to the people of Nevada who
Yeah.
work in the hospitality industry, and it worked for him. The guy has no base principles, and he will say, and he will lie, and he will repeatedly do that. And man, millions of Americans got sucked into the vortex.
I'd like to get a feel of what it was like. You were there on the
Yeah.
eve of election day. What did it feel like being in and around Americans on election day eve? Was there a sense of which
Yeah.
way it was going to know, or did really nobody
Look,
expect it?
no, it wasn't expected. It wasn't expected. But when you reflected back on the conversations you had with people in the local diner, in the local bar, in the local barber shop, you get it now. I wish I was a good enough pundit to sort of realise that. And the other thing is that I wanted to win. So I'm probably some of my predictions were wishful thinking.
Right.
No, no. The view was that it was going to be very tight. Whether you spoke to Republicans, whether you spoke to Democrats. But I tell you what, I did not at the rally, but outside of the rally, I did speak to some very staunch MAGA folks, and they were absolutely convinced that they were going to win and that they would take the Latino vote with them, that they would take a fair chunk of the black man vote, which they have done, and simply on the basis that they've had enough of the establishment. And he was able to draw the Democrats as the establishment.
Yeah, completely right. And then what about election day? I mean, obviously, fairly early on in the evening, it was
Yeah.
there was a result on the day of the election. How
Yeah,
did it feel
yeah.
being there on election day? When did
Look,
the kind of vibe start coming up? Oh, we see what's happening here, and how did the punters react to that?
well, look, I didn't get the only feel I got was I was at a watch party that was
Hmm.
very staunch Democrat, and you could see, and I've been there before, Pat, myself, you
Yeah,
could see the enthusiasm uh, and the blood sort of drain from their face. But the next day, yeah, DC is a very staunch Democratic town. You could tell people were depressed and people wanted to get out of there as I did. But Pat, I'd been chatting to the maintenance guy that worked at our local hotel. I was there for 3 or 4 days. Ask about him. How's it going today, my friend? How's your family? And I must get to New Zealand. And then the day after the election, he said, "Good morning, how are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm a bit depressed." And he said, "Well, I understand that." And he said, "But today's another day and we've got to get on with life." And that was the view that I got out of many people. And I had dinner with some friends in DC's very liberal people, and I jokingly said, "Come on, hop on the plane with me." And said, "No, mate, we've got to take ownership of our party. We've got to organise, and we've got to ensure that Trump's clause on the power as limited as possible." And and they had their first chance to do that just in 2 years' time, in terms of the midterms.
Yeah.
And if they can win the House in 2 years' time, that will severely slow down his ability to enact legislation, just the way that their system works.
Yeah, but I mean, don't want to sound like too much of a pessimist, but how many people after this result would expect them
Yeah.
then to win the House? I mean,
Yeah, I know, man.
That's a rough one.
I get all that. I get all that. But just the message. And the other thing is that millions of people just didn't vote.
Yeah.
I think that's quite evident. And
Yeah.
we saw that here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, particularly in, the seats I always talk about, Manerua, Manukau East, and Māngere. And we saw that in heavily populated Democratic areas. My gosh, Pat, they lost 10% of the vote in New York, in California, in the staunches of the staunch sort of Democratic votes in states. And, when you really don't stand for anything that people can put their finger on and can say, yeah, that's a great policy and this will affect me now, then people look for the alternative. And we did that at the last election when Chippy said bonfire policies, and all he really replaced it was with GST or fruit, fresh food and vegetables, and a dental program that wasn't even going to be put in place for 10 years. You got to stand for something, and you got to stand for something now that's meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, you probably know this, Shane, before the last election, and I think it's true the world over. If the left votes, the left wins. And Kamala underperformed every single state as compared to what Biden got. Trump had about the same number of votes. Kamala had 15 million fewer votes than Joe Biden. So Trump kept his base, and maybe there was a bit of toing and froing, and people fled the left. The left has this is what it looks like. I mean, I'm being blunt because it's what it looks like. That it looks like that America is saying the left have nothing to offer us. I mean, the mandate that he's been given, like you're saying, popular vote, first time since 2004, since George W. Bush. He's going to now be able to set up the Supreme Court to and beyond 2050. It's like it's a complete rejection of the left. Now, I think in some level, and we'll look at some of this later on tonight, they've been fooled, like they've been tricked by a con man, but it doesn't really matter now because the score is on the board. He won.
The score is on the board. The score is on the board, and it will take some time for the Democrats to sort of regather. And the part of the problem is that it's quite an institutionalized party. It's about hierarchy. It's about time. You have a look at their leadership. Biden, their president, their original president nominee, Nancy Pelosi, still has a huge influence. Chuck, the surname escapes me, the head of the Senate. These folks are all 80 years old plus. It's such an institutionalized party. I'm not just talking about age, and it's very hard for new, fresh talent to break through.
Yeah. I think the big question for all those politicians who watch our show, especially those guys on the left, is what is there to be learnt from this result? The utter rejection of policies from, and there's some people in the chat saying, stop calling the Democrats left. In the American setting, they're on the left. So a complete rejection of that style of politics and what they're offering. What is there to learn for New Zealand left politics and New Zealand in general?
I think that you've you just simply can't. I think that people on the left are sick and tired of politicians that say we can't do this, we've got to be incremental, because incrementalism is very easy to overturn and it doesn't get people very far. I think you've got to have quite a strong agenda that you're willing to back. And I think Labor, for instance, has the chance to do this, whether it be a wealth tax or a capital gains tax, but you've got to stand for something, and you've got to stand for something that is meaningful. And all due respect to Chippy, GST, or fresh food and vegetables, was not meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like you're saying about standing for something, what they did well in the last term is they kept New Zealanders more and less compared to the rest of the world very safe in the era of COVID. But then when the election came along, that was somewhat toxic. So they didn't sing their own praises from the rooftops about how they kept an additional 20,000 New Zealanders alive. And because they didn't shout about that, they had nothing left to shout about. So it looked like they had nothing.
Well, I get that. I get all of that, and I sympathise with that. But when you are going to the grocery store and your basket of kai costs $90, and 3 months ago it was $70, and your wage is and you haven't had a decent wage increase for 2 or 3 years, that's soon forgotten, because people are dealing with the reality of their daily lives. And when I sat down and I spoke to some of those Republican-leaning folks, they knew that he was not going to fix healthcare. That they knew that the tax cuts that he introduced, by and large, were for the wealthy. But my gosh, I just think that they just got tired of the incumbency, and there was a deep view amongst many traditional supporters of the Democratic Party is that it had become a party for, and I hate using this term because I get called it sometimes, of the elites. And just really frustrating that we had been almost being mistreated by the Republicans. We can put up with, but by our own, we can't.
Yeah, be interesting to see what happens from here on in. There's a couple of chats I'm just going to put up there as well. Spider says, kia ora Shane, nice to see you on the show again.
Kia ora,
Spider Hoof. Kiwi Bird says, well done Shane for surviving the US election. And there's another one here, not related to the US election. Kiwi Rail reports today that the government is gearing up to apologise for cancelling the ferries and admit it was a mistake. I hope Labor milks them for it. Interesting if they do that. That would be the grown up thing to do. I can't imagine. We call her Nikki No Boats. Nicola Willis. We can't imagine Nikki No Boats actually saying she was wrong, because if they admit they're wrong, then when they do bring out their second-rate solution, they'll get tarred with that for the rest of time.
Pat, can I just tell you another observation? About my time in the States.
For sure.
By and large, whether the Republican, Democrat, or they don't like talking about politics, Americans are very hospitable. They're intrigued about the fact that I'd come all the way from New Zealand, and that I was interested in politics, that I knew a lot about sort of the history of the United States, and willing to have a chat, and many of the issues or the questions that they have are the questions that you have, like how's your family, how are they coping, how do you put your kids through university, what happens when you get unwell, and I said, well, we have universal healthcare, not far from perfect, but certainly better than the system that you have. So, just ordinary people having conversations and corridor, and that's one of the things I really enjoyed about many of the visits that I've been to in the States. And, by and large, they're actually very polite, generous people with their time.
I've interviewed a few conservative Americans as a part of this and other podcasts that I've done, and they're always dumbfounded when I say, if I break my arm on roller skates, I go to the hospital, they set it, and I walk out, and they go, how much? And you're like, it's just, that's what it is. Yeah. There's videos all over the internet. If people want to look them up on YouTube, people in the UK being asked how much, or it might be the other way around, how much does it cost to have a baby in America? And the UK people are like, well, nothing, and they're like, well, it's $12,000. And they've asked the American people how much they have a baby in the UK, and they say, 10,000, and they're like nothing. It's unfathomable. The one other thing I was going to say though about the healthcare, there's a saying that I've used numerous times, which is when America sneezes, the world catches a cold.
That's right.
Through their economy, but now. I mean, there is word going around, and I don't think this will happen, so I'm not being overly dramatic, but what Robert Kennedy Jr. Is thinking about doing with things like vaccines and stuff. And taking power away from the governing group that legalizes various drugs, that we then use their kind of system to say, oh, they're safe for us then, that it could literally mean the world catches something terrible with what they're proposing. It's scary. I saw another one as well. Donald Trump's putting out these little clips all the time at the moment, and he's got one where he talks about 10 things, and his first thing is, and I stopped it after the first thing because I was so shocked. The first thing is, from now on, parents will be able to decide what their children study in school.
Yes. That's right.
Parents will be now deciding what the syllabus is, not the education specialists, not what's needed to go through a school, not the experts, but parents.
No, science will be a relic of the past on a lot of fronts. But Kennedy's other big game is he wants to do away with. He wants to make America healthier again. I'll tell you what. But he will not win a battle against big corporate food America. That's two of the things that America has been fueled on over the last 20 years: cheap mass-produced food and cheap mass-produced fuel. And take that away, and the economy will crash. So, I think they've overreached, but time will tell. It's early days. I understand buyer's remorse is there. As it was with Brexit, but he has got a very, I'll give you an example. We thought that the Democrats would do better because they had a better on the ground game, but he doesn't rely on that. He just relies on direct messaging to people, and he gets traction.
Scary. And the only thing that I think is another possibility of happening is he's been all bluster. This is Trump, I mean, right the way up. Like, for example, 200% tariffs. We're going to talk about that later tonight. And then when the rubber hits the road, he won't do it. No. Because he might finally realize, I can't do it. And the only reason he was saying he was going to do it was to kind of point out how hypocritical the Dems are and how he's going to make America first again. But when it comes to it, he may not do it. He may not impose those things. And so therefore you might actually end up having a result that's, I'm not going to say a typical US government at all, but maybe more typical than, because we're concerned at the moment about the worst case scenario. So maybe not quite the worst case scenario, maybe still bad, but maybe not as bad as people are thinking today until he gets
in. The other thing is that America is an economic superpower, but is not the economic superpower it used to be. The UK thought they could walk away from Europe, and Europe will curtail to them, and that hasn't proven the case. Quite the opposite. The UK's got some long-term problems. Basically they self-imposed economic sanctions on themselves. I just think that the US, if they're not careful, could fall into the same boat where, Europe, Africa, which is growing economies, China, India, the BRICS sort of countries, they will form their own alliance. And America, for a long time, hasn't got the manufacturing sort of grunt that it has in the past. It's still very important in terms of IT and new technology, but it's not the economic superpower that it once was. Life has changed.